Welcome to The Human Code, the podcast where technology meets humanity, and the future is shaped by the leaders and innovators of today. I'm your host, Don Finley, inviting you on a journey through the fascinating world of tech, leadership, and personal growth. Here, we delve into the stories of visionary minds who are not only driving technological advancement, but also embodying the personal journeys and insights that inspire us all. Each episode, we explore the intersections where human ingenuity meets the cutting edge of technology, unpacking the experiences, challenges, and triumphs that define our era. So, whether you're a tech enthusiast, an inspiring entrepreneur, or simply curious about the human narratives behind the digital revolution, you're in the right place. Welcome to The Human Code. I'm your host, Don Finley, and today I'm joined by my good friend, Russell Ditnes, a brilliant mind with a deep curiosity about AI and its impact on our lives. In this episode, we dive into the fascinating world of AI and its potential to amplify human curiosity and intellectual growth. Russell and I explore how media consumption shapes our thinking and the challenges posed by information overload in today's digital landscape. We discuss the promising applications of AI in medicine and space exploration, envisioning a future where technology helps us live longer, healthier lives and unlocks the mysteries of the universe. We also tackle the pressing issues of social media addiction and its parallels to other forms of dependency, shedding light on the importance of balancing our digital consumption. And finally, we look at how AI can revolutionize personal productivity, giving us more time to focus on what truly matters. Stay tuned for an insightful and thought-provoking conversation with Russell Ditnes. I have here my good friend Russell. I love this. Russell, I am once again blanking on your last name, even though we just went over it 15 times.
I think you should just say it the wrong way. That's a better.
This would actually help with what we were talking about on the privacy side, and then making it like your online persona could be one way, and then you could just be Russell
Come on, man.
Ditnes.
Ditnes, you got it.
Ditnes.
That's
Okay.
good. You
I
got it wrong
still,
again in the beginning.
I,
What's
I,
interesting is you got it wrong in a new way. Like you had gotten it wrong the other way like 3 times, and you actually were so nervous about it. You got it wrong in a new way, which is impressive.
it's amazing that I can know you for at least the last 6 months and
Yeah.
can define new ways to like butcher the name. But at the same time, like me being nervous about it just creates new fun with it.
That's
So,
right.
dude,
It's your podcast, so that's why you have.
hopefully the audience realizes that I bring on brighter people than myself. And I think that's the gift that I can give. My pronunciation of people's names is unfortunately lacking. But hey, bud, thank you so much for being here. Always fun to talk to you. That was really the impetus of getting you on the show, is because like our conversations end up going places that I just think everybody else would find interesting. So if you wouldn't mind, what brought you here today?
Like you said, we have these great conversations, mostly because I'm interested in AI, what you do. I'm interested in everything. Like I was about to say, like jack of all trades, but what's the problem is like with the internet and with all the podcasts and everything out there, you can make you feel like you have a jack of all trades, when really, yeah, you're not a jack of any trades. That's the truth,
It
right?
is.
Like I'm like a 5 of diamond of all trades,
But do
or
you
something like that.
know the full saying?
Master of none.
No,
Master of none.
continue it on.
Oh,
No, there's actually more to it. It's jack of all
really?
trades and a master of none is still better than being a master of one.
I see. That also people say Renaissance man. I think that's you're just interested in a lot of things. And that probably fits better than because trade implies I actually can do something, which might be a stretch. But now Renaissance also, I don't like that either because it's like an Old Spice commercial guy. I feel like that's not me either. But I'm interested in things, and I think.
But it makes it, that's where the interest lies, because you're always connecting things from one side to the other as far as like where those passions can intersect. And if you just focus on one of those areas, you miss out on that interrelation.
The same way that the algorithm feeds you what you're interested in could be like one thing. So everyone's feed is pretty specific to them. right?
Yeah.
It's nice from like the idea is to make that convenient for you, right? Like we're just going to tailor everything to exactly what you want, right? But that sucks too, right? Because then you're boring. You're only thinking about those things as opposed to breaking outside of the box and looking at new things, right? And so that's what AI is like more than new, right? It's like the unknown sort of to a degree.
Yeah.
So that's why I tortured you with all those questions, right? About what is it? What are you working on?
That's not at all. It's exciting when somebody takes an interest in the things that you're doing. And that's definitely something I've appreciated about like how you and I can connect. Because you do bring this like childlike wonder to whatever I've been showing you. And I think that's one of those spaces that our work life sometimes misses out on, is realizing that we have the opportunity to create stuff that we wanted to play with as a child, or we have the opportunity to create stuff with that childlike wonder. And so to see somebody who is curious about that with that same kind of play is a lot of fun.
I think it's easy. I think everyone's intellectually curious,
Mm.
right? But I think that people are afraid to ask questions sometimes because it's embarrassing, right? Like it's something that's complicated or you don't quite understand it. You're talking to someone who does, right? And you just don't want to sound like an idiot. You're interested,
Yeah.
but that fear just keeps you from pressing or taking someone's time or
So
whatever.
how do you get yourself over that hook?
Part of that, I think, is just being comfortable talking to people, which
Yeah.
I think I am naturally. I don't know what that means if they'd say like you're an alpha or whatever. I know I probably talk too much, that's for sure, right? I'm probably more of a talker than a listener, which is ironic because I'm curious. I want to hear what people say, but then I want to talk about it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. But I think definitely people in general need to be encouraged to just interact more, or at minimum, take both sides. I have a legal background, and so
Yeah.
I think like that, for better or for worse, it forces you to think about both sides of an argument, and that's probably, I think most people would say that's what's missing today. Everyone talks about the same theme that everyone argues so much, whether it's the internet that brought that on or whatever. Just listening to both sides is lacking, right?
This is an interesting path to wind down because my own personal take is I try to look at, and politics is the one area that like I see this the most, right? Like you
Sure.
have two sides. We just have two sides. It's the way the system is designed, essentially, is to have two opposing views of each other. But when I notice the news sources that one side is going after, and then the news that the other side is going after, there isn't even an agreement or alignment on here are the things that are challenging for our country today.
I think part of that is, I don't remember who said this, but the same way Walmart took over the mom and pop stores, the same thing happened with media. And in terms of like ratings, you just had these giant companies that realized that they just hit one side really hard and that's the audience they're going to get. Repeat those big themes on the right or the left.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the audience. Or with bigger headlines or clickbait or whatever you want to call it. And it just has become that more and more. Now, of course, if you want something different, there are hundreds of great podcast shows, political, more down the middle, that give you the full story. But you have to look for it, right? Because the people, like the powers that be, not in an evil way, just like you said, from a marketing or ratings perspective, they dominate. So they dominate what gets put in front of you. And you literally have to go on like a treasure hunt to find something that's not that, right? To force it into your algorithm that's going to get pushed to you.
So I think that's one of those spaces that I appreciate about AI is that it can actually bring me information that I am really in tune with. And then something you were hitting on earlier, though, is it can really drive us into a very singular echo chamber of our own views and our own ideals. And so having that something that pulls you outside, challenges, I think would be much more apt. But at the same time, I understand that doesn't drive as much engagement.
No, let's look at what's in the news, right? With TikTok. It's not just TikTok, like whether it's YouTube Reels or whatever it is, right? Like most of what that is something in short doses, right? So first of all, it's probably making us dumber just in the sense that it's like forcing us all to have worse attention spans. Because when you get used to something in small doses, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 20 seconds, and I'm not saying anything new, right? What they call it like the swipe right sort of mentality. Your
Yeah.
brain gets used to things like in short doses. It's hard to focus on the big picture or both two sides of an argument, so to speak. So to go back to what I said, where it's like people aren't, when you think about anything, right, whether it's something simple or really complex and serious, you're usually not thinking about both sides. You're thinking about the side the way you think of something, right, that echo chamber mentality, and you're not thinking about it on the other side. But here's the crazy part. Like I said, the clips and most news and most things, there's not even enough time to present both sides, but you're certainly not getting both sides, right? Part of that is because it's when someone presents something in 20 seconds or 30 seconds, they don't have time to present both sides, right?
Exactly.
And it's usually, they can pre-record it, right? Like they can say things in an articulate way that sounds great, right? So that whatever that side of the argument is powerful because it sounds good in a 20-second clip, right? And you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then that's the way you think of that thing. How many clips have you ever seen where someone's like, let me tell you about this subject, right? But let me tell you about the other side too, right? You never see that, right? Whatever the point is, they make one point, that's it. There's never a counter. We could probably spend hours looking at stuff like that in short clips and never find anything that's presented with like, but maybe you should consider this. Never.
No, we don't.
It's
And we
all
don't get that.
one-sided arguments.
And the way that we structure the arguments is almost so that any reasonable person will buy into your side, and then you paint the other side in a way that's just almost demonic, is like the way that I would, I don't know if I would go that far, but at the same time, you look at it as the other side's opinion is so off base that you never would want to understand it, kind of thing.
Sure.
And it's sad.
That's a good point. It's either painted very quickly in a way that's, you can't say that in every scenario, maybe the other side is wrong, right? Or whatever that issue is. And so they're just rattling off the other side quickly, and maybe it really is wrong, but in most cases, it's not quite true, right? There's always like a gray area.
Exactly.
But you're certainly not getting that other side.
Yeah.
In most cases, it's not even mentioned, is my point. So it's like the way everyone gets their information these days is probably in a way that's not great for like critical thinking, right? Because it's in the short dose, right? It's not this extended, let me think about that, right? Like we're not doing that. And it's one-sided. So it's not a great combo.
And I appreciate you bringing this up. How has this impacted your law career as well? Or is that a space that you actually are still sitting in looking at sides?
No, I don't think it affects that. I think it's just more, I don't want to call it entertainment. I just think when people have like the phone in their hand, it's more of like their downtime is when you're getting those doses of information. And I don't mean to, it's almost like I'm saying like, 'cause it's an AI podcast, right? It's not negative. There's so many exciting, interesting things about AI, right? And I'm always asking you, like, what companies are you doing things for? Or you always hear about productivity, right? AI is going to increase productivity, right? That's what markets are counting on with AI. That's why there's so much investment dollars there, because the productivity will manifest, right, in some way. Whereas I think people who don't follow markets, they just sort of think of AI as it's going to manifest in like making their life easier from an entertainment perspective, make us even more lazy, or what's like Rosie the robot from the Jetsons.
Oh,
totally dating myself, but like that, right? There'll be a smart bot that will bring me coffee or something. I think that's how most people see AI.
Yeah.
Or for gaming or something like that. I don't know.
It's an exciting use case that you're looking forward to.
I don't know about taking something and then making it better. I think the most exciting, I think the best part is probably like in medicine. Like you think that it will just make us healthier. And you see that. I don't know why I'm thinking of that CRISPR or like DNA and
Oh,
everything like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But that is an example, right? Like finding diseases at an earlier stage. You just think about kids and stuff like that and helping kids get over things faster, but all living longer, all of those things. I think that's probably the best thing I could think of. I would say that anything related to space is probably the coolest thing to think about by far, right? It's like, where are we going kind of thing? Can it help us get there faster?
Have you heard of the crabby aliens
No.
theory? Okay. Let me see if I can summarize this in 30 seconds and we'll find out how many comments we get for how wrong I get this. But at the same time, what it is this thought that if you're going to go out and explore the solar system, you're probably going to do it with probes. And
Right.
so the probes that you use, because it's going to take you at least 4 light years to get to the nearest star, those probes are going to want to be self-replicating. So when they get to the next system, they'll create themselves and they'll continue to expand. So 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. Exponentially, they will go out and continue to explore the galaxy, sending information back, sending resources, etc.
When you say recreate itself, like what does that mean?
Oh yeah, so this is a
Specifically.
field of robotics, of basically having a robot being able to build itself.
Because I'm thinking like in the most basic sense, like that robot will stop working at some point. So he needs to build himself again anew, send the
And
new one further out.
and to expand.
Okay.
So like one robot needs to create 2 robots, and those 2 robots would then create 2 more themselves. So you have 4 in that generation.
Further and further out in space.
Yep. And they would continue to basically land and expand throughout. And one of the challenges to the is it the Fermi paradox, I think? The Fermi paradox basically says, like, why haven't we seen aliens kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And there's the great filters that come by that basically are certain milestones of like single cells becoming multiple cells, becoming intelligent life. And I'm skipping steps here. But then also, you invent nuclear weapons. And that could be the thing that just destroyed every other civilization that got to that point. So a great wall that you can.
Did you watch 3-Body Problem
Yeah,
on Netflix? Did you like it?
I did.
So I read the book, so I was excited for the show. I thought it was great. I thought they did it justice. Benioff and Weiss, they did a great job. I don't want to spoil it for you, but the main theme going forward, that is like the second book, I believe,
Yeah.
answers your question about that. If there's aliens or other life forms, like, why haven't we seen them? And that's the crux of the rest of the story.
Forest?
Correct. So
Yeah.
without getting too deep into it, like that space is the dark forest. And in theory, sure, if something's out there, they should have found you already. Or should they? And then when you really think about it, I think about it the other way. I don't know if I'm biased because I read the book, but outside of the theories from 3-Body Problem, most of what you see now, especially with the new telescopes and everything that are taking better and better pictures. And I think I saw something on Twitter, which is funny. It was like totally ignored. They're like 8 new planets discovered, like right next door, which in theory would be like on the news or something. But meanwhile, it was like, oh, cool.
8. Yeah.
Yeah, another 8. And then like never to ever talk, not even mentioned. And so I think it shows you that it's like the opposite. It's so big where it's so much bigger than we can comprehend, literally, that it's much more likely that we never know. And not like we could go through our lifetimes and never know, but go through like the multi-billion year, however many, whatever made up number of years we supposedly have been here.
Yeah.
Right. But you could get into that also. But no, whatever number that is. And I'm sure it's a big number, right? But that 1 billion years maybe is nothing in the context of what's really out there. So we are like, oh, like you said in the beginning, like, how would we not see any life forms by now? Surely we would have. What are you talking about? Like, why? What do you mean? A billion years could be 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes go by. You don't see anything. That's normal.
And this like grabby aliens theory comes to the conclusion that and I'm going to misquote it. You think like, how long would it take us to actually cover the entire Milky Way galaxy? And because it's exponential numbers, it's a lot quicker than you actually think it would be. It's not 100 million years. It's something along the lines of like 10 million years for you to cover the entirety of it. So at half, you're basically at 5 million or something like that. But you're 100% correct that like the universe has been around for what, 15 billion years now, or at least that's our current understanding of it.
I think that's always funny also. Again, not to, what do I know? But I just find that really funny when the measurement by human with a civilization of however many tens of thousands, like something relatively short.
Yeah.
And then like we've come up with a measurement system where we're like, yeah, we're pretty sure that's like a few million years, right? A few million years compared to like the 10,000 or 20,000. It's just always funny to me. It's like, yeah, we did the carbon testing and the dinosaurs, it's 400 million years ago.
Exactly.
Like, really? Again, if it could be totally right, but it's funny to me that that's the measurement system. When we think about how many things like we measure in our day-to-day lives, when they say like, all right, you're making this mixture, pour 16 ounces, and like you pour it, like, yeah, that's about right. You know what I mean? So like, why couldn't we be off by 10 million years or 500 million years? Like, I don't know.
We totally can be. And there's things that are coming out from JWST right now, the James Webb Space Telescope, that are making people question, have we actually gotten the timeline correct? Because we're seeing galaxies that are well more formed than our current model would have allowed. And so somebody came out with an idea, and this was a rather apparently poorly written paper, but it got in the news, that the universe could actually be 26 billion years old, right? So we are going to find out that we have no clue at some point.
So you're making the point, and I wanted to comment just to say, I'm not poking holes at scientific theory or questioning carbon dating or any of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
All of that is based on these foundations and with brilliant people. But like you said, it doesn't mean that what was accepted, we shouldn't question everything and say, that's got to be wrong, or right? Like, conspiracy theory wise. But it's okay to be open-minded about other theories, right?
Exactly.
We're not trying to prove Einstein wrong, but at the same time, just allow for the fact that we're talking about something that we really can't know about, right? So they have books on
like pushing the boundaries.
Quantum physics for dummies. Quantum physics for dummies but it's really cool because they get down to it and then they tell you like, yeah, we can go smaller and smaller under the microscope, and then eventually, the only way we can explain it is it's magic, like how these two things are circling each other. And we're like, okay, that's pretty crazy.
And that's like our best understanding today. And it's kind of like, you talk about Einstein. And I think I've shared with you my favorite quote of his, but it goes to the three-body problem and the dark forest. And he goes, the biggest question that you could ask yourself is whether you find the universe to be a friendly place or an unfriendly place.
Right.
And so if you find it to be unfriendly, you'll use your technology and everything else that you know to create separation between you and the universe. And if you think that it's friendly, you'll do the opposite. But when talking about the dark forest theorem, there's some weight to that as far as why we would look out and see nothing.
That brings in the game theory element of everything, which is present everywhere, like in the world now and always. And you could get really dark with that, right? Because it is always present. I don't want to go into that too deeply, right? But it's like a survivalist element. You look around the world like that, when everyone talks about like geopolitical conflicts, that is always really what it's about. There's a limited number of resources, period. There always has been. You could go back, I forget what that book was, History of Man or something like that.
Oh, okay.
But It's true, right? There's always that element to it. But we're here, right? Civilization, progresses, and hopefully society gets better and things like you don't have to get dark with it.
And I think there's a lot of benefits to it as well. We're like understanding the progression of knowledge is always like an envelope that you're pushing farther and farther. Newton wasn't wrong about how gravity, and right, like he
Right.
had a model that was able to predict 99.3% of the time kind of thing, or it was 99.3% accurate, where then general relativity comes along and it's 5/9 accurate. But we still don't have an understanding of how to match the quantum universe with the macro level. And additionally, we also have no idea how a black hole works, right? Like we get past that one point and it looks like time and space flip. And I personally can't explain to you what that means, but that's what like the math shows is now you're in a place where you can move in time, but you can't move in space.
I think it was Interstellar that sort of tried to put it together, or not, at least present some type of theory. And that's, like I said, that's why I mentioned I think that's the coolest element of AI. Can it help us not solve these problems, but think about them differently, right? Make some sort of progress, some new way of productive thinking about like where we could go or what we could do. Like you said, that's what it's all about. That's like at the heart of being intellectually curious, right?
Yeah.
What else can we think about, or what else can we do?
Where else would you like to see, or I guess, how would you like to be interacting with this AI? You want the robot in the house? You want the AI?
It's a great question.
Yeah, because it's almost, I personally see it as I want to have more human relations, right? Having connection with people. AI is helping us to produce this podcast. I get to spend more time talking to people like you instead of doing administrative tasks or editing on this. Yeah.
Time was the most valuable thing, probably, like in theory, right? Because we can have this conversation, right? You could do things that are interesting to you. So if it creates more time for you, that's great. But I think what would be nice would be, like, I think you mentioned earlier, or we touched on, like the software will enhance this podcast, right? It will help the audio, or we'll do these little things, or there's all these reminders now, right? Like you hit your sleep goal, or it's time for your meeting. And those things are great. But I think if you take that to the next level, it would be nice if we had sort of, your phone can tell you, hey, it's time to go to bed. But if you really had Rosie the robot, like walking into your bedroom and saying, dude, put the phone down now, almost like a parent, right?
Yeah.
Let's be honest, like that's what people need, right? Because if that person is not there to tell you, it's just a little notice like that pops up on the phone, and that's some people follow it, right? But most people don't. It's like the snooze button. Okay,
Yeah.
and I'm going back to sleep anyway. I think that physical being, like in your house with you, if you want to program it that way, could be a motivator, like a real motivator, right? It's not going to be a human being, but the closer and closer they get to looking like one, I think that might be the most useful case, right? Like just an actual motivator. It's like, why do people have personal trainers at the gym? Sure, like they can tell you your form is wrong, right? Obviously, that's a huge benefit. You don't want to get hurt. The knowledge is important for sure. But the motivating part is probably like 90% of it, right? That person saying, come on, like you're doing, I know this exercise, you hate this exercise, get on the mat, you're doing it. Or like one more set, one more rep, or whatever it is. That's a huge part of exercise, I think, and that's
Absolutely.
a meaningful thing, right? So I think of it as like the personal trainer of your life, right? You need an actual person to hold you accountable, not just like a pop-up message.
That is one of the reasons that I get trainers, I get coaches, right? That accountability
Sure.
kind of that to it, right?
Do you want that robot, Are you going to program that robot to physically knock you out of your bed? Maybe. I don't know. That sounds dangerous. But
Yeah,
right.
like sometimes that extra push could be helpful. And at the same time, it would be not. Here's where I would love to have it. Get all those things that you're talking about, but there are different patterns that put you in that situation where you're picking up the phone, like where you're picking up the phone to look, to scroll,
Of
kind of
course.
go. So if the AI could be wise enough to see what was the cause of you doing that and get you understand you well enough to show you your shadow in a way that is both caring, compassionate, and allowing you to make that decision from a more conscious place than from a kind of either distracting yourself or just like leaning into the dopamine addiction.
I was about to say, unfortunately, it's a conflict of interest, right? Because that the algorithm in your phone is probably controlling the robot as well, or at least the companies are tied together that are bringing those services to you. That being said, I think that's almost more of a reason for that. We always, first of all, we think about them like it has to be a robot. Like when we say AI or that, but for argument's sake, like I do think it makes sense in this context because I do think like that physical presence, that human presence, not in the sense of the like ex machina, let's make it a real thinking
Yeah.
brain that can think like a human being, but more of just the physical presence tied in to the thinking part where it's actually like someone in the room with you. It's almost like I keep thinking of Tom Hanks with the Wilson, like with the volleyball. I mean, like that the volleyball had meaning to him.
Yeah.
So certainly like a walking, talking robot, it's not a stretch to think that robot could be a real motivator to people in a way that Siri is just not in your phone. It just is not or cannot be, right? It's almost like, to go back to Interstellar, right? Remember Interstellar had those robots? I think it was called Jax. And
Yes.
that robot was able to, it not only did it have a personality, but he could ramp up the humor, right? Or tone it down or whatever like that. So I'm thinking of something like that, I think could accomplish like what we're talking.
There is work on making large language models more or have greater emotional quotient. So like having a higher EQ and understanding the tonality that you're using, the emotion that you're placing into things. And so basically being able to fit that role or at least understand humans from a capacity of like, all right, I know this person is sad. So I need to approach them in X, Y, and Z instead of if they said the exact same thing but had a happy tone to them.
And there'll be plenty of people that will think it's absurd, right?
Oh, yeah.
And say, whatever, this is just a robot talk, right? And not utilize it or accept it as something that has emotions and so that those emotions can tap into your emotions and affect you in a positive way, right? Or a motivating way like we're talking about. But there'll be millions of people who do use it in that way.
And there's a couple of companies right now that are actually coming out with AI girlfriends.
Yeah, now that part is, again, like shame on me for just jumping into taking the other side and saying that's terrible. Like, humans need to connect with humans, and that's how we reproduce. And
Yeah.
I think that's the obvious argument against that. And my hunch is probably the right argument. However, it doesn't mean that companionship level like that can't help people as well. Who knows?
And then additionally, like it could help people in understanding, let's say, anxiety that they have in social relationships, right? There could be benefits to having a type of relationship like that, but I agree with you as well. The end goal shouldn't be to having that as a permanent relationship, but having that as maybe a temporary, or additionally, we're coming up on major demographic changes in a number of countries. China itself is basically upside down already
Sure.
as far as having an older generation that's going to need to be supported. Their younger generation is remarkably skewed male rather than female. And so there's going to be a portion of people that aren't able to form relationships.
I agree. I would say also that, let's face it, like the iPhone is a new thing, right? It's a
Yeah.
very new thing. And so you're going to have I'm not saying like it's producing waves of generations of people who don't know how to go out in the world and communicate because they're scrolling on their phones, right? However, one, we don't know really what type of generations we can guess because everyone's addicted to their phone. Like when we talked about earlier, as far as like having shorter attention spans and things like that. And I could take the other side of it and say that because of all the different chat rooms and interactions that people are learning to, like kids are communicating faster and I don't want to say better, but than they would without the phone. I mean, someone could probably make the other argument. But I do think like what you're saying, bridging the gap for people who have, calling it socially challenged is the wrong thing, but maybe have their own anxieties or whatever it is about social interactions because of this iPhone generation. I'm not even saying it in a bad way. I'm saying it is what it is.
Yeah.
That maybe that could help, right? That AI robot figure. The anxiety thing is absolutely real. It's funny, like talking about what we said. It's amazing how podcasts and like how all this information is at our fingertips in a way that it never was before, right? Like you think about the idea of an encyclopedia, like that's sitting in your house is really, it's funny, right? You tell kids that and it's like talking about a phone booth or something. But with all that information, it's, I think, just having good information can cause anxiety because you think to yourself, wow, like I have all this information, right? There's so many like life hacks and all these things that it's like it creates this feeling like I should be doing something with all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, oh my God, like I have all this info. Like I should be putting it in my day-to-day life, or I should be used like we're talking about. Like AI should be every hour, like I should be learning something new or think. And that definitely creates anxiety, like information overload, on top of the fact that you're getting the information potentially faster than like our CPUs can even handle it. So it's like you have this FOMO feeling that you're not doing something with all the information you're getting, on top of the fact that you're getting it at like warp speed. I listen to most of the podcasts and audiobooks at 1.5 or 1.8. Who knows? I don't know why I started doing it. Like probably listen to some person who spoke slowly, and now all of a sudden, like I can't, unless it's something very complex, I'll listen to it at regular speed, but usually it's 1.5 or twice the speed.
Yeah.
That's probably not a healthy thing to do. Who knows? But
it's interesting that you say that because I found myself increasing the speed because I was able to, it was easier for me to comprehend the matter when it was coming at me at 2x speed. Because it gave the brain less time to wander
that's a good
into
point.
something else. And so I basically was like, all right, let me fire hose it. Because if I fire hose it, then I can actually pay attention. It forced me to pay attention.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You're probably also much smarter than me.
I doubt it.
So you could just absorb it faster. I'm sure there are studies that say, and I think this has been around a long time, where they say we only use X percentage of our brain, right? And they say, I don't know what it is. It's a low percentage, or we're not using our entire brain. Now, again, who knows if that's true, but let's assume that it's partially true. So maybe we're capable of much, given the fact that we can amp it up from 1 to 2x and be totally fine, is making the argument that maybe we could reach 4. Who knows, right? Like who knows? It would be an interesting study to see like how fast can you listen to certain things and then answer questions about it. So that's pretty cool.
Where does comprehension fall off for people?
Yeah.
And so there is this other thing that I do, which is somewhat aligned to it, but basically like your conscious mind can only absorb or process something like 40 bits per second, right? So it's low in comparison to your subconscious and your unconscious that are processing millions of bits per second. Like neither one of us have thought about our breathing the entire time that we've been on this show, heart rate, blinking, right? Like all these things are just taken care of. But as a danger that showed up, we would be alerted to it and that would be brought to our conscious. So when I'm reading at like between 2 to 3x, I'll get into a meditative state. Because if you can drop your brain to that theta wavelength, and bring yourself to that point, you're actually able to essentially write directly to the subconscious. So if
You're saying if you go faster, if you speed it up, you can get to that state.
So if you basically meditate, okay, so meditation, you can change your brainwaves so that you're able to communicate directly to the subconscious. And so that the conscious mind basically isn't analyzing before associating with it.
Okay.
So if you have an author that you trust and a piece of work that you trust, you're able to get to theta, get into a meditative state, drop into theta. And for me, it's a feeling, it's very relaxed. It's almost like a state akin to sleep. And then I'll listen to a book at 2.5 to 3x because the subconscious is able to process information in that way. And I don't want the conscious mind to be analyzing anything.
But to get into that state initially, you're saying you have to, when I think of meditative state, I think of what you said, which is slowing down to get there.
Yeah.
So then you need the robot to then come in the room and turn your thing on 3.5 speed while you're in the You can't do both. You need that robotic assistant to get.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I want to stick with that.
Okay.
Which is funny because we talked about information overload, right? Like causing anxiety.
Yeah.
And not only that, information coming quickly. So what I was saying is us processing information, or just the fact that information is being fed to us, right? On all these different apps and in our phones.
Yeah.
That could get just the speed in and of itself can cause anxiety, right? When you're having to process information left and right. And maybe, like you said, you hit on it in the sense of if it's information you trust, or maybe it's like the voice of the narrator of an audiobook. Like for me, that's a huge thing with audiobooks, who's telling the story. But yeah, I think about this, it's like Limitless with Chris Hemsworth, right? Where he had the episode about dealing with stress. And when he's stressed, and he met with one of the psychiatrists that helped him, taught him box breathing, right? Where he had to slow everything down in order to lower the stress rate. So I tend to guess or believe that that's true, right? Like when things are going, you're so fast, like that's causing stress. And the way to decrease stress, which is what worked for him and a lot of people, is don't go that fast. Slow it down. If you're at the gym and you're running and you see the heart rate go up, do that breathing, whatever you have to do, and all of a sudden you see the heart rate drop. So it should be the same thing with the brain, you would think. So I was surprised to hear, but I guess like you're saying, once you're there and you're in that relaxed state, then the brain can take on all types of information at different levels that you ever thought were imaginable. That makes sense. That makes sense. But when it's like junk food sort of thing of just scrolling, whether it's fun stuff or doom scrolling, either way, it's probably not the best.
Exactly. And it's one of those things where I've got to trust the information and trust the source before I do that, or else the analytical mind will want to come in order to make things change. The other benefit of it that I look at is I'll drop into a meditative state and then open up a notepad and start typing. And so I'll have things that I'm like looking to work on, because I think where you're getting at is how our emotional state is before we start the work is going to dictate how the work is being done. And both the thoughts impact the emotions and the emotions impact the thoughts. And so if I'm angry, I've noticed that I come up with very angry responses to what's happening. Like we are in one of my businesses, we are in the middle of a restructuring of sorts. And I've noticed that when I get disappointed in how we got here, it creates an entirely different perspective of how I'm approaching the challenges in space.
Yeah, I think everyone's mood affects how they think. That's what they say. Don't make decisions when you're angry, or don't make important decisions when you're angry or stressed or whatever. That seems to go without saying. Easier said than done. It's funny when you mention the meditative state, like I picture you like on a yoga mat on the floor. So then when you said, once I'm in this state, then I start typing and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You're on the floor, man. What do you do? Like, or someone's like lying in their bed with someone putting them in a trance. I'm like, you're not typing anything. You're sound asleep.
Oh, yeah.
But I guess it's, and I don't meditate, but I guess it's, you can get yourself there while you're in this creative workspace, that's awesome.
Exactly. I can do it sitting right here. I don't know. We've had calls where I'm at the cafe, right? And I will literally close my eyes and meditate for a few minutes, like sitting in a crowded cafe before I like jump into something, because it does have that much of an impact on being able to focus, being able to participate. And that's really the key of it. All right.
That's
So
cool.
one more question for you.
Yeah.
With all the stuff that's coming out, right? AI seems to be jumping in. We've gone through this paradigm of we're at another digital transformation. I have a feeling that this is going to be just as big for everybody as we start to crack more and more problems and see implementations as both e-commerce and also electricity. How are you telling the younger generation to adopt to this or to be ready for the transitions that are coming?
I mean, they're learning in such a different way than we did.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, right? Because I think they feel like they understand the technology more than us in certain ways. They certainly use it in ways that we never did, obviously, because it didn't exist. So it's like in the fabric of everything they do. So when we're trying to teach them about like where the technology is going or how to think about it, it's tough because in many cases, like they're more familiar with it than us.
Yeah.
And two, we don't really know where it is going. I'm glad you mentioned the energy. I thought about that earlier in terms of, I mentioned medicine, but I think agriculture is a huge thing for the entire world, and energy is the other one. And so if it could just increase productivity there, help us manage energy, whatever that means, that's another huge talk about two sides of the divide, green versus nuclear and stuff like that. But assume it's going to help in some way. I think that the algorithm and the dopamine stuff is another thing that is a way bigger problem than we realize. So I think more important than teaching them about what they can do with the technology and AI, it's almost just as important to the warning signs to them should be maybe bigger. And I think it's going to be like smoking. I think I might have mentioned this to you before. I'm not the first person to say this, but the same way smoking, it took years and years before the warning labels were put on the packages.
Yeah.
And now you get to today and yeah, people vape or smoke or whatever, right? And you have legalized smoking and whatever, but like cigarette smoking, I don't want to say it's a total thing from the past, but it sure feels like it. Whereas it was like mainstream in society, right? Look back at old movies and things like that. And so it was the warnings and then people dying, right? Like that eventually got it to where it is now. I'm not saying that it will unplay the same way or play out the same way with the iPhones and stuff, the smartphones, but we all talk about the dopamine stuff, and like you and I talked about anxiety. We didn't even touch on it. We talked about like that next level anxiety, just information, good information. The obvious stuff that kids see, right? Like the FOMO or getting depressed because of things they see or other people doing things. That stuff's real. The dopamine thing is real. Again, it's something that did not exist for us.
Yeah.
And I just think that algorithm is so strong, man. And by the way, we're also caught up in the algorithm. So when the adults are caught up in it as much as the kids, who's warning the kids? No one's warning us.
Exactly.
So it's almost like all parents are doing like a collective, gigantic shoulder shrug when it comes to this stuff, because they don't really, there's no easy way. There's no way to fight that algorithm, and we're too busy to do it. And most of the time what we're too busy doing is being in the algorithm ourselves. I don't know what the answer is with that, but I do think the cigarette thing is a good analogy. I think it's going to take something like that. Unfortunately, it may not come along for a while, if at all.
I think it's a good analogy for two reasons, right? Like before we had all the warning labels and we had Sometimes you even get like the skull and crossbones on various cigarettes,
Right.
depending on the
Right.
country that you're in. Like before we had that, there was a general understanding from people that like, hey, this may not be good for you. And people saw before government stepped in that, hey, maybe I should watch my behavior. Now, a lot of people, it was mainstream. It was part of culture. It was being emphasized and also shown as being cool. But I kind of see that we do have the opportunity today to take a step back. And I know we were talking about not having a big social media presence is like an opportunity for you because you've made that decision and then you're able to recognize your privacy because you haven't given that up. And that really, once you do start to give that up, you're down that path. So I think
And much easier for adults to do it because
yeah,
we didn't grow up with it,
yeah,
right? It wasn't like all of your peers were not doing it when you were 10 or 12 or whatever it is.
exactly.
So much easier to just say, I don't need, I'm not going to do this. I don't need to create this profile or do that. It's much easier than when just literally everyone is doing it.
Exactly.
So they're down that rabbit hole, man.
Oh, dude.
There's no, like I said, the AI, when you talk about AI, I mean, like the two are linked, right? Like the social media, the presence, like when they talk about the data sets that they're trained on, right? Like it's there, man. It's hand in hand. Like when we talk about Google searching, to me, it's like when the kids are in those reels and they're watching those videos, like the algorithm is doing the searching for them. They don't need to type it in the box, or they typed something in the box, or it was there in the first place, or it's recycled to them with the videos they watch. But it's all sort of one thing. It's a really strong thing, and it's just not being taken seriously enough by anyone. That doesn't mean I know the answer of like how to deal with it, but it doesn't make it less of an issue.
No, but I think you're highlighting an important point here, and it's be aware of how you're interacting. Be curious about what your interaction is helping you with or possibly hurting you in your space. I have a mindset question that goes on. Let's say I want to play more guitar. And so I write down like all the reasons why I want to play more guitar. And then I also write down the reasons why, like what would stop me from doing it. And sometimes it is, hey man, you've been spending a lot of time on social media. So that's the thing that's definitely going to pull you away from it. Russell, I got to say, really appreciate having you on today. It's been a lot of fun as always for us, just the thoughts around and enjoy.
Yeah. Always enjoy talking to you, man, for sure.
Thank you for tuning into The Human Code, sponsored by Findustries, where we harness AI to elevate your business. By improving operational efficiency and accelerating growth, we turn opportunities into reality. Let Findustries be your guide to AI mastery, making success inevitable. Explore how at findustries.co.